Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Online Marketing Simplified. I am your host, Brad Parnell. I've got a really special guest with me today. So she's going to tell us a little bit about her journey and some of the techniques that she uses to get in front of more people effectively using LinkedIn and just some of her strategies for creating content and just connecting with people on a one-to-many strategy, which is way more beneficial than trying to have coffee or lunch with every single person you know, because we have a limited amount of time. So I'd like to welcome Alicia to the podcast. Welcome, Alicia. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
My name is Alicia Keener, and I live on the East Coast in the United States. I'm currently a director at a Microsoft partner. And Brad contacted me a couple days ago, and we were just chatting about how do we reach our audience? How do we kind of go on our journey together? And being an entrepreneur, I started my own company in January of 2009. I'm currently an employee, but I have been down the path of being an entrepreneur. And there's a lot of challenges around it. And also being an employee and bringing in sales and different things like that. There's a lot of different challenges and things that you kind of go through. So today I'd like to talk to you about my journey and some of the things that I do that have helped me be successful in the Microsoft space.
I love that, Alicia. So tell everyone a little bit about how you got to where you're at now with the Microsoft consultant. What are some of the things that led up to your current position?
Yeah, so I actually am on the path to being a Microsoft MVP. In the United States, there are only about 16 women that are Microsoft MVPs. And so a few years ago, I kind of thought, hey, it'd be really nice to be a Microsoft MVP, but I really didn't put too much thought to it, didn't really think it was really that achievable for me at the time. And then back in March of 2023, so just 10 months ago, 9 months ago, I started looking at LinkedIn and I was like, you know what? I have about 900 connections at the time. And I started thinking, I'm like, I have all this knowledge. I've been in the Microsoft space since 2009. And I'm like, why can't I just help one person? So if I'm going to have all this knowledge, like, why don't I just reach out to the audience and say, hey, if I can help one person, then I've been successful. So I started doing these posts on LinkedIn called Tip of the Day. Well, little did I know that starting to help one person turn into hundreds of people. And now I have almost 2,300 connections about 9 months later. So I hope I've made a lot of people's day a little bit better. And since then, I've had another Microsoft MVP reach out to me and say, hey, would you like for me to nominate you for Microsoft MVP? Because to become a Microsoft MVP, you actually have to be nominated either by another MVP or someone from Microsoft. So hopefully in Q1 of 2024, I will be able to fulfill the dream that I've had of being an MVP for Microsoft.
That's incredible. So your tip of the day, that's such a cool story. I want to back up there for a second. So you were inspired to help, just thinking if all your knowledge could just help one person. And I think that mindset is so important. I was listening to another podcast on that from another thought leader influencer, and they were talking about, hey, if you want to help lots of people, the first thing you need to do is figure out how you can help one person, because if you can't help that person down the street or across the street, you're probably not going to be able to help a whole stadium full of people. But sometimes we get lost in that idea of like, I want to help everybody, but if you can't help the one, you can't help the many. So I think that approach is huge that you took. So I would love to ask, when you were coming up with those tips of the day, were those just already planted in your brain? Did those organically just come out, or how did you plan for doing tips every single day of the week?
Yeah, so it was kind of one of those things I'd kind of get, I'd be working with a client and they had asked me a question and I'm like, hey, if they had that question, someone else probably has the same question. So I'll just blog about that today. Or sometimes I would be just get something on my mind. I didn't put a lot of thought, research it too much. I just kind of went with my gut. But I knew that if I met meeting the needs of many, and one of the things that I kind of went into this with was I'd rather do it messy and get it done than not do it at all. Because one of the things that I've heard a lot of people say is that they don't want to start blogging or they don't want us because they're not ready. I don't think you're ever ready. So it doesn't mean you don't have a plan. It doesn't mean that you just carelessly do something, but it's better to do something and not be perfect than not doing it at all. So I think really the key there is that progress, not perfection, is the key to success. I also think you need to train your brain to see opportunities and not threats. So whenever you go to do something, you ought to say, like, hey, what's the opportunity in this? Not
Mhm.
what is going to threaten me or what are the 10 ways I'm going to fail. Think about the 10 ways you're going to succeed. So I
Yeah.
really think it's a paradigm shift in our own self-talk.
So good. I love that. Because I think just to add to that, your subconscious mind will start to go in the direction of your strongest thoughts. So when you're
Yeah.
thinking negatively, it's kind of the Napoleon Hill think and grow rich mentality of just, how you think is how you will live. So I think you're right. It's the law of attraction. If you start thinking negatively of all the bad things that are going to happen, those bad things are probably going to happen.
It's true.
And on the converse side, if you're thinking about the positive side and have that enthusiastic or positive mindset, positive mental attitude, you'll naturally attract the things that are better. And I think that's where a lot of people, will throw around that false word of luck to be like, man, Alicia's just so lucky. It's like, is it really luck, or is it because she put in the hard work and had a positive mental attitude and she attracted those things into her life?
Yeah. Yeah, it's very true. And I think the other thing too, it depends on who you're surrounding yourself with. Surround yourself by people that will encourage you and help you through that journey or help you on your path. And if you get some naysayers or some negative criticism, hear it for what it is, but know that it's coming from someone else, not from within you. Because lots of times it's telling you more about that person than it is about yourself. So when someone does come up and say, well, oh, this or that, hear it for what it is, because there could be a nugget of truth in it. But don't dwell on it. Just take it as their opinion about something and kind of move on. The other thing that I've noticed is the further I go, the further I can see. So on my journey, as I've started blogging and I've started becoming a bigger influence inside the Microsoft community, at the beginning, I couldn't see anything, right? I'm like, hey, I'm just throwing something in the water. Let's see what happens. And then, but the further you go into something, the more you start to see what resonates with your audience. You start to understand maybe perceptions or the way you word certain things, but you start to understand. So you start evolving and you start to really kind of hone in on like your audience and things that they need to see or hear so that you can resonate with them.
That's great. So would you say, Alicia, that as so the further I love that the further you go, the further you can see, as you were in those different places, sounds like doors were opened or things were revealed to you that you needed at that time that would have been impossible for you to have at the beginning of the journey.
Oh, absolutely. Like I've made contacts with people really all over the world now. Like I spoke at a Microsoft user group conference remotely in India back in the spring. Would have never been asked to do that if I hadn't have done this. I've had conversations with people even locally in my own town that found me that otherwise if I hadn't have started blogging and doing things on LinkedIn, they would never would have found me. I had a conversation with a guy in London about a month ago. So there's people like from all over. They start reaching out like, Brett, I would have never found you if I hadn't started blogging. So there's lots of different connections and stuff. And that's one of the really cool things is you don't know who you're going to touch or who you're going to be touched by. So for me, whenever I do these things, it's really about what I can give, not what I'm going to receive. So when I go into it with that heart and with that mentality, it's really my expectations aren't like, oh, well, if I do XYZ, then I'm going to get this. It's more of like, oh, if I do XYZ, then I'm going to be able to help that many more people. Because really helping people and serving people is where the true reward is for me.
Man, this is packed full of so many good growth nuggets in here. So you guys that are listening, make sure to go back and re-listen to some of these things Alicia is dropping because she's saying them kind of fast and stringing them together. But there's some amazing, huge truths with just personal development and mindset coaching and some great things that she's actually experiencing. And what I love is instead of just talking about it from a philosophical point of view, you're experiencing it like you're living this right now. How does that feel to be in the middle of it?
It's exciting because I don't know what's next, right? It's one of those things like, okay, so I'm going to become MVP hopefully in 2024. Who am I going to meet? what kind of impact am I going to be able to have, or who is going to impact me in that process? So really becoming MVP with Microsoft, it's not like you get money for it or you get these kinds of things. It really allows you to be a part of an elite kind of group of people at Microsoft. And it allows you to be a bigger influence inside of the Microsoft community. So my motivation for doing it was to broaden my footprint, broaden my circle of influence so that I could interact with people that otherwise I never would have interacted with.
So if we back up for a little bit, because I still want to go back to this tip of the day, because I feel like, would you say that's the one kind of epiphany moment you started doing this, and that's what kind of snowballed everything to where it's at now?
It was. I mean, I think it was March the 6th of 2023. I woke up and it was pretty active on LinkedIn. So it's a couple of things to know about LinkedIn is there's only 4% of people on LinkedIn actually contribute. Okay,
That's a
noodle on that
shocking
for a
number.
minute.
That's a shocking
4%,
number.
right? So that means the other 96% are consumers. The other thing to know is the average income of people on LinkedIn is $100,000 a year. And they're predominantly, I think it's 51% of them are males between the ages of 35 and 45. The other thing to know is they actually look at LinkedIn on their computer, not on their phone. So that may not seem that significant, but that means that they probably have taken a shower, brushed their teeth, or sitting down to work, right? So they're actively looking. It's not like they're just passively sitting there flipping on their phone, watching TV. So the audience that you're actually talking to on LinkedIn are usually business professionals that are actively looking for something. So when I started blogging, I started noticing that. I started getting this traction with people that were actually communicating back to me. They were DMing me, they were saying, making comments and different things. So I knew that they were actively participating with the content that I was providing.
Those are some amazing stats. I've actually never heard those before. I think we assume like, yeah, B2B, LinkedIn, okay, check the box next, but
Right.
only 4% are contributors. So a lot of people are just consuming information. Average household income, was that household income is about 100K?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
yeah. Mhm.
And then looking at on a computer. And I think you provided some really funny context to that, but I think that's important to know, right? If we're looking to connect with high performing entrepreneurs and business people, LinkedIn feels like a great place to be. And it's not just going to be sitting in school at a car line where you could whiz by it on your phone or in line at Starbucks and you might see something and then be like, oh, that's interesting. And then you forget it. But people in front of their computer probably have a larger attention span and ready to consume that content. And like you mentioned, business professionals actively looking for something. So that's a huge gold nugget right there for those that are trying to get those kind of people, get in front of those people.
Yeah. Now LinkedIn is unique among like the other like Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is actually a search engine. Unlike the other platforms. The other thing is with LinkedIn, um, they don't want things to go viral. So, when you're on like TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, the whole concept is like, oh, let it go viral. And that's not LinkedIn's, the algorithm doesn't pick that up. They don't want that. They want people to have conversations. So when you're providing content, they want you to be teaching someone something or doing something to create a business conversation. That's why when you're on LinkedIn, you don't see a lot of propaganda or political posts and stuff like that because the algorithm actually doesn't propagate those. So there's from a business perspective, it's a great place to be. And I think you'll know, I mean, most entrepreneurs and people in different market segments, you'll notice that the people that are successful are those that contribute.
Hmm.
So if you want to be successful, if you want to get your edge out there, start being a contributor, not just a consumer. And because people need to hear your voice, like there's certain things that I may say that may resonate with someone in an entirely different way than Brad, if you said it, or vice versa, right? Because we're going to use different words, we have different life experiences. So it's one of those things that it's people need to hear you. So in our audience today, it'd be really good. Like put your stuff out there, put your business out there, because really sharing is caring. And who knows who you're gonna help today? Right? That's when I make a
Yeah.
post, I sit there and I think that I'm like, wow, I don't know who I'm helping today, but here it is, right? And then all of a sudden I've got 500 likes on a post or something. That's like hitting an audience or an auditorium with 500 people in it,
Yeah, that's
right?
huge.
So it is, it's significant.
So what would you tell someone? So let's imagine a listener on here is mostly posting to Facebook right now. Everything's kind of falling flat. They're hearing what you're saying. They're wanting to start maybe contributing more and getting in front of the right people. What are some steps that you would recommend, whether that's mindset, whether that's practical, like step one on LinkedIn? What are some of the things you'd recommend they start doing?
I think it's consistency. Show up and be consistent, especially on LinkedIn. LinkedIn wants you to post 3 to 4 times a week for the algorithm to pick you up. The other thing that's nice about LinkedIn is it doesn't just go to your connections, it goes to like the first and second layer down. So you're starting to hit a much bigger audience than you would like on Facebook or something like that. But again, if even if you have to do it messy, do it anyway. So don't let that perfection thing of like, oh, well, if I can't post every day or I can't post 3 times a week, I'm not going to do it at all. No, you change your mind, change your mindset. Because one of the big deals and the big things about being successful is you have to go from that fixed mindset to a growth mindset, right? I catch myself all the time. I'll have some opinion about something and I'm like, oh my goodness, that's a fixed mindset. And I start questioning, like, why am I thinking that? And then I'm like, this is just wrong. Like, I can do this. Like, so tell yourself, don't tell yourself you can't, tell yourself you can, and then find out your why. Why are you doing this? If you started your own business, you had a very strong passion about that business, or you wouldn't have started the business in the first place. The other thing is, whenever you're reaching out to your audience, don't get into the weeds too soon because you have to think they're just saying like this little blurb. So don't get all technical at the very beginning. Tell them why they care. And it's not about you. So when I post my things, I don't go, oh, I've been in the Microsoft space, for 15 years. I've been working in 14 countries. I don't go into all these details because frankly, until they know what that you care about them, they don't really care, right? Once you've actually tell them like share something with them that they need or they want or it's going to alleviate, help reduce some kind of risk in their life. Now all of a sudden they are interested. Okay, well, what information do you have to help me reduce my level of risk or help me with some health issue or help me with something?
That's great. Isn't it amazing how everything comes back to like that simple golden rule? Like it's all just like, hey, treat others how you want to be treated. Like if you were reading a message or marketing or reading someone's article and it's all about them, like how's that going to make you feel? And I'm so glad you mentioned that. I was rewriting some copy, some marketing copy the other day, and I realized um, how much of it had the word like us and we and our, and I was like, man, that is not good. So
Right.
it's
Great.
it's a really good exercise to go through and even reading your own website or your own post and see how many times you mention the word like us, we, our, and change that and try. Like I think a good exercise is try to rewrite that without using any of those words. Think
Yeah.
about it all in terms of that other person, their value, their problem, their solution. Like how are they going to benefit? Um, that is such a good point. I love that you brought that up because I was just in the middle of doing that the other day, and it was shocking when you look at it through that lens, how many us, me, mine, I.
It's so true, right? Yeah. And I think sometimes it's because we don't necessarily truly understand who our audience is. So sometimes we really don't know what they want. And so it's much easier for us to talk about ourselves because we know ourselves versus them. So I think when you do shift that paradigm and start talking about what they need or how you can help them, it also forces you to start digging a layer deeper, saying, do I really know what my audience needs? And I found that personally, like in my personal life, because I redid my LinkedIn profile this year, and I was just like, man, this thing is all about me. Like to your point, I mean, I was like reading it, and I'm like, this is just. And plus, originally I had it almost like a resume, and I'm like, this is just boring. Like, why? So I totally changed it up, and so it really is. It's a whole shift, and I think you relate to your audience so much better when you do that.
Have you read the book How to Win Friends and Influence Others?
No, I haven't.
Okay, it's
Shh.
You would love it. So it's kind of the same thing on that golden rule, but it speaks directly to that. The whole premise of winning friends and influencing others is making it all about them, which is exactly kind of what you're doing and how you're creating posts on LinkedIn, how you're giving tips of the day. Those aren't tips that you're doing for yourself. The tips of things that you've learned along your journey. And while you're still on that journey, you're sharing with other people and helping them pull them up so they could be along with you on that same journey. And the win friends and influence others, it's just that. It's hey, if you're, at a restaurant with someone or a coffee shop or online or wherever, just make it all about them. Ask those questions. And you start to notice too, when people ask you about yourself, how much more you light up, right? It's like you're either falling asleep because someone's boring you to death about their life story, or they're saying, "Hey, tell me about this. What did you just do?" And it's as simple as like, "Hey, what have you discovered lately? What movies have you watched? What books are you reading? Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that." Because we get so self-absorbed sometimes, we just want to share what's on our mind. So I love that idea. I think it's applying these old school principles of, the golden rule, do unto others as you have done to yourself, and then the win friends and influence others. And you've put that in a very digital realm of how you start creating daily tips and share with others. So let's go. I love you talk a little bit about, progress over perfection. It's better to get something done just messy, and I completely agree with that. I just actually did a post in an email yesterday that was on that topic, ironically, of um, messy progress over perfect completion or perfection, because that doesn't exist. So if someone is sitting down and they're starting to think of like, hey, if I want to do a tip of the day for my industry, um, do you recommend them just creating what's on their mind, kind of just putting it out in a format and posting it and seeing what kind of feedback they get? Or what are some best practices that you've found when you're creating something like that?
I think you need to talk to your younger version of yourself. So you can say, when I started out, what did I need to know? Or what did I struggle with? Or maybe I was, working on a project and I ran across this business scenario and I was like, kind of like, oh my goodness, how would I do with this? So think about a younger version of yourself, and that'll help you kind of start this story in your head. And because sometimes it's hard to talk to a black box of sorts. Like if you're just sitting there looking at this huge, ERP system called Microsoft, you're sitting there thinking, well, I don't know. But if you start thinking about like your business scenarios, or you start thinking about like, wow, you know what? I was really hung up on this one field. How did I solve that problem? Because the other thing it starts doing is it lets your audience know that you've struggled too. So if you're an entrepreneur or you're in business or you're doing different things, lots of times we struggle with the same things, but lots of times we don't tell people about it, or it's not verbalized. So sometimes people can look at you and think, oh, they've got it all buttoned up because they came from this kind of family, or they had this kind of education, or they made these, I mean, like for me personally, I wasn't a good reader until I was in high school. Right? My whole schooling, I always struggled with reading. And then all of a sudden it kind of clicked with me and I became a good reader. But whenever you look at a successful person, you're like, oh my goodness, they just have had all this, like everything's been rosy. Well, I can tell you, I've gone through some significant struggles in my life, like personally and with my family and just different things. And so it's not those things when they come into your life, don't look at them as obstacles. Don't become bitter towards those things. Just know that those things that seem like trials or darkness in your life are actually preparing you for the next thing, right? They're times of growth. It's kind of like the butterfly, right? They're in the cocoon and they actually have to like become liquid and struggle out before they can become this beautiful butterfly. We're the same way. So as we go through these trials, because everybody's going through something all the time. I mean, it's different levels. Some days are, you feel like you've got the green light kind of thing. Matthew McConaughey, if you've heard him speak about that. And other times you have the yellow lights and the green lights or the red lights, but they all have a purpose. So I would encourage you to look at them with an open mind when you're in those moments, because the clouds may be there, but the sun is always above the clouds, always. In fact, I was going through something earlier this year, and it was like a dark time for our family. And I was flying. I'd been to Denver, and the clouds were dark below, and we were going up through there. And we got above the clouds, and it was bright and clear. And I could just feel God pecking me on the shoulder saying, the sun is always there, even if you can't see it. And I just sat there on the plane and cried because I was just like, I knew that I wasn't alone.
Yeah.
And I knew that the sun was there. And guess what? The sun did come out and the clouds did roll back. So the only guarantee you have in life is change. So learn to grow in those times of darkness and in the times of sunshine, because the sun is always there, and you will learn and you will grow through it.
That is powerful. That is powerful. I feel like that little snippet needs to be like a little separate audio section that people can just play and listen to daily. Thank you for sharing that. I think we forget sometimes, as entrepreneurs, it's easy to get in the moment of isolation
Yeah.
and think I'm the only one that has ever had to face this struggle or go through this pain, or even not entrepreneurs, just humans. But we're so good at just looking at everyone else's highlight reels and not realizing that the pains we're going through, one, are common. Like the pains that we go through are super common. And most people are going through them right now at that very time. But no one, to your point, no one shares about them. So I think giving yourself permission to, uh, push through that pain and find that sun and knowing that you're not alone
Yeah.
is important. Thank you for sharing that story. That is uh, super cool. I love that. Um, all right. So what are some other things or tips, Alicia, that you would give like entrepreneurs here? I genuinely hope that you guys are hearing all of the good things that Alicia is saying here. I'm here listening and I'm thinking back of all the podcasts and entrepreneurs I've talked to and I've listened to, and there's so many cool good nuggets. I think you've got a real gift of synthesizing things that you've heard and that you've learned and that you've experienced and bringing those to the forefront. So you've shared so many neat little nuggets here that have been great. Um, what would be maybe again if someone is coming here and they want to start doing something different, they want to start posting, maybe they're doing tips of the day. Do you think like putting those on a blog would be better for someone than going straight to LinkedIn, or how do you use blogging and LinkedIn together?
Yeah, so I actually have my own website. It's aliciakeener.com. And so whenever I do my posts, I actually post them to my website. I also do some like videos as well. So I'll do those in YouTube, and then I put those on my blog site. And then inside of LinkedIn, I put the link to my blog site. So that way it's an archive of them. So that way people can go back and search them later. Because if you just post them on LinkedIn, I mean, they can go back and find them, but it's not nearly as easy than if they're all compiled on your website. So that's worked really well for me. And so that's what I would recommend.
That's great. I love that. I'm glad you said that too, because I think a lot of times people forget that what goes on social isn't permanent. I mean, it is in terms of like
Right.
you're putting it out there and it could be archived somewhere, but if you're directing people towards like a blog or a landing page or something that you own, and then giving people a way to what we call in the digital world like a sales funnel, ascend your sales funnel or value ladder, you're getting going from social to a blog or a page where they can then, put in information in order to get something of value and then start to hear from you on a nurturing basis through emails. That's typically what we coach people on, which I love that you're doing. I think social is a great way to attract the right people, but also make sure that you're not just living on social. The goal is to get them into like your CRM or something else that you can have meaningful conversations. Because it was a couple years ago, Facebook just shut down one day and it was just gone. And we were working with a lot of health coaches and we were trying to get them onto our Genie Rocket CRM, and it was a good day for us because we were kind of like, well, we told you so. Like, you can't have your CRM on Facebook. Like, if Facebook goes down, like you're out of luck, and you don't own those contacts. Like, it could all go away one day. So that was a good eye opener, I think, for a lot of people of like, oh, this can all just go away, or I don't own these businesses. I've heard someone else say like it's like building your business on rented land. When all of your contacts and conversations are just on social, um, that's just rented. It could all go away. Um, so cool. So tell me this, Alicia, if you could
Yeah,
go back to
that's
your
good
younger,
advice.
if you go back to your younger self, knowing what you know now, what advice do you think you would give yourself?
I've thought about that before, and I think I would give myself permission to enjoy the journey because I'm very goal oriented. I'm a planner, and one of the things being having those kind of characteristics, sometimes it's hard to live in the moment. It's because you're always like planning for tomorrow or you're planning out for the next year or those kinds of things. So, but what I found is when I was younger, I would have a goal, I'd reach the goal, and then it'd be like, okay, so what's the next goal? It's like reaching that goal is sweet, but it's short lived. And so I would think that the younger version of myself, I'd be like, you know what? You're going to have the grace that you need for that day. Live in the moment and then live in the next day and the next day. So as I have matured and as I've gotten older, for me, I'm more excited about the journey than I am the destination because now I get it. But my younger version of myself, I didn't get it. I was always very ambitious and, wanted to do all these things because so I could get to here. Right. So I think enjoying the journey and learning that there are opportunities all the time. And what I mean by that is sometimes whenever you think that a door's been closed, it's just because you're supposed to see something else. Even like now, whenever I'm working in the software, I'm doing something and I have a problem and I can't figure it out. Used to, it would have frustrated me. Like, why can't I figure this out? Now, when I run into a problem, instead of saying, why can't I figure it out? I say, what else am I supposed to learn? What else am I supposed to see? Because I cannot tell you how many times I've been working on a problem that I couldn't figure out. And I learned 2 or 3 things that I didn't know before. And those are the exact 2 or 3 things that I needed like a week later. So it's one of those things of having that open mind and having the open eyes to actually be able to see those things, to be open to seeing those things. And a younger version of myself, I wasn't there. So that would be, enjoying the journey and realizing that everything happens on purpose for a purpose. And there's something for me to learn, even in those times that seem like they're not quite so fun.
So that is so good. Do you have a book or a podcast, or how do you share some of these insights with the world?
Right now I don't. I mean, I blog about technical things, Microsoft things. I've had a number of people reach out to me and say, hey, do you have any kind of class on how to become a consultant? Or do you have any kind of podcast or something like that, or any medium of sorts to teach people these, some life lessons and different things. So I've kind of noodled on it a bit. But at this point, I enjoy people like you that have their own podcast and share that way.
Yeah, well, we need to get your message out to more people. I've been this is just kind of off the wall, but I've been, thinking too about in the future, I've been putting on kind of small conference, either in person or virtual summit. But I think, you would definitely be a great addition to that, trying to find like-minded, passionate, positive people that have a solid message to share of hope, but also of just like some tactical, practical stuff. I think there's a missing gap in the world of people that just speak on the philosophies and then people that are, you know, grinding it out too and actually doing some of the work. So I think it's neat, people that are in the journey, like to where you are at, you're in the middle of it, you're excited for where you're going. You don't know what that exactly looks like, but you're enjoying the journey and have great insights to share along the way. So I so appreciate you just being authentic today, Alicia, and being on here and sharing all this with us. Thank you so much for just your time and for who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Brad, for having me. It's been a pleasure being here.
So for people that do want to connect with you, before we maybe put on some sort of cool conference in the future, how can people stay up to date with what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go to LinkedIn and look at my name, Alicia Keener, or you can go to Alicia Keener.
That is awesome. Well, Alicia, thanks so much for being on the show. We'll put the link to in the show notes so you can go check her out on LinkedIn or her website. And thank you so much for being on. Thanks, everyone.